Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's toolkit session. Before we start, I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging that I'm broadcasting from to and from stolen lands. I'm broadcasting from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and my guest tonight, Tegan, is broadcasting from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay respects to past, present, and future elders, extend that respect to any First Nations people tuning in tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and that though we may meet tonight in cyberspace, the computers, the servers, the fiber optic cables that are used to route this talk to you tonight, they occupy physical space on what always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Toolkits is a 12-week program for writers aged 30 and under to develop their skills in a unique and exciting online environment. Toolkits is run by Express Media. Express has been around for over 30 years, developing, supporting, and promoting young writers through workshops that develop skills, through opportunities for constructive feedback and publication, like VoiceWorks magazine, and through awards and programs that recognize excellence. Toolkits is an online program with participants from all over Australia. Over the next 2 months, we're presenting season 2 of Toolkits live for anyone to tune into each fortnight, with a focus on poetry, digital storytelling, and performance poetry. The Toolkits program is generously supported by the copyright agency Cultural Fund, so thank you to them for that. The session tonight will be available on YouTube as a resource, and it will be captioned in the coming days. If you'd like to ask any questions, you can do so on Twitter using the hashtag EMToolkits or via the live chat section on YouTube. Please ask questions throughout, and we've set aside some time at the end of our talk to respond to them. The digital storytelling stream of Toolkits aims to teach the forms, skills, and ethics of creating stories for the web and beyond. It's facilitated by me, Rory Green. I'm a writer, editor, and digital media artist. And tonight our guest is Tegan Webb. Tegan Webb is a writer, zine, and digital art maker. Her stories and digital experiments have been published in places such as /lit, Scum, and Ibis House. She has performed at and hosted workshops for events such as the Free Play Independent Games Festival, Emerging Writers Festival, and the National Young Writers Festival. She is also a library worker, and as such is very passionate about free, community-driven, and lifelong learning. She still doesn't know how to code properly and will probably never learn. In tonight's session, we're going to be focusing on navigating digital tools. When and how should we pick up new technologies for making digital stories? Tonight, we're going to examine casual and professional tools for authoring digital stories. We're going to discuss first experiences with new tools, the interplay between form and technology, and how to avoid getting lost in tutorials and user guides. Hello, Tegan.
Hi.
That's the
Thank
spiel
you for
over.
having me. Yeah, thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Thank you so
I'm very
much
excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited that you're here too. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. To start off, could you tell me a bit about yourself and the work that you make? Perhaps even also the tools that you use to make those works?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, yes, I generally write. So I'm a fiction writer mostly, but the last kind of 5 years or so, and a zine maker as well. I've been making zines for a long while. But yeah, the last few years or so, I've been working a lot with digital, I guess, tools. So free tools mostly. The first one that I started using, and what I call, I suppose, my first love, is Twine, which is a kind of interactive storytelling tool. And so I've made quite a few interactive pieces with that, largely fiction, a bit of poetry, a little bit of nonfiction. And yeah, I've kind of, from there, that kind of inspired me to, or just kind of motivated me to seek out these kind of free open source tools that you can use to make really interesting dynamic work. So I make stuff with Bitsy as well. which is a I guess a game maker tool. The feel of it, I really love it. It's a tool to create little games or worlds. It's kind of like a 3-color palette, very simple kind of pixel art tool, but you can make some really, really cool, interesting stuff with it. And you can come to it without any kind of coding experiences, which is how I kind of came to all of these tools. So yeah, I made a interactive poem for that with Bitsy this year. That was my kind of first foray into Bitsy poetry, called Pocket Map, which I'm very proud of.
Amazing
And
piece.
oh, thank you. Yes, it was published in Cordite, so that was very cool for me. And yeah, I'm just very excited about working with these tools, teaching other people these tools. I work at a library as well, like you said. So, and yeah, I was able to run some programs around teaching people how to use these tools in lockdown as a way to kind of yeah, get them excited about this kind of stuff and kind of remove some of the barriers to like digital art making and ideas around coding and what you actually need to to know in order to do it, kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
How do you go about teaching these tools in the workshops? And I guess kind of a flow on from that, like how do you go about learning these tools? Like, do you have a particular approach or a set of principles when you're like learning or teaching new tools?
Yeah. So when I'm learning, I really like to, or at least allow myself to kind of play around with them. I learn mostly by doing, so I kind of gravitate towards tools that I can pretty much kind of jump in and usually they'll have a few little instructions, but I can just kind of jump in and mess around in them. So things like Bitsy and Twine are really good for that. You can kind of go in and just start playing with them. The play element, I think, is really important to me. It's just a really fun way to learn, and I find it kind of really motivating to kind of keep writing more so than and like working through ideas. I find it quite motivating to have that kind of play element in there. So I kind of let myself just kind of mess around and see what I can make in them, essentially.
And it's also
Yeah, and
scary
then
sometimes, you know?
yeah,
Having that
totally.
element of play just kind of reduces the pressure a bit for yourself when you're sort of experiencing a new tool or making anything new for the first time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that feeling of like, plugging in some, instructions and then it actually working is like really, it's just so satisfying and fun. And it takes a lot of the scary parts of, oh, I have to learn a whole language, like programming language kind of thing out of it. So yeah, I kind of do that for a while. And usually while I'm doing that, something like an idea for a kind of where I want to actually take the story will kind of emerge. Usually it doesn't always work like that, but usually something will come up and I'll be like, okay, that's the thread that I want to follow. Let's kind of pull this back a little bit, because I guess the thing with things like Bitsy and Twine is that there's lots of different stuff you can do, and it can be really fun and exciting to like try all these new things, but then you can kind of fall into the trap of like, oh, I'm going to make all the text do different things. I'm going to, make everything, move, and like you can click on every word and it can get a little bit overwhelming from like the
Yeah.
reader or player experience. So kind of thinking about like which mechanics I like to use, but also which ones are kind of feeding into the story, which will like, I guess, serve and elevate the story so that it kind of creates a really, I guess, good experience, impactful experience, I suppose, to the reader or player. So I kind of go through and, pull out some stuff, be like, that was fun, but it doesn't really serve this particular story. I'll save it for something else, or I leave a few in sometimes just for fun. But trying to kind of streamline that a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like I'm thinking about what you said about this trap of just like throwing everything in, and it's interesting that because I do think there's like there's lots of little traps that you can fall into when you're like interested in making digital work and sort of are starting to kind of step into that world. And for me, I think one of the big traps is like saying that like, oh, I need to learn this before I can start making something with this, or like I need to learn every part of this before I start making something. And you know, I love learning new things, and I love like reading tutorials and software documentation on how to use tools and stuff. But like, it's not the same as like making things, and like you can often just like pick up so much just in the act of like mucking around within a tool like Twine or Bitsy, you know. Whether you're using them, whether they're tools that you use on the computer, like in the browser, like Twine and Bitsy both have, or if you're using like desktop software, like, you know, I mean, Twine has a desktop version, but also I'm thinking about like sort of Adobe Tools, electric zine machines, stuff like that, where you're using on the desktop. Nothing beats that space of being in the tool, hey.
Yeah, totally. And some of the best stuff can like come from that too. You like, if you're like, okay, I want to do this thing, and you'll plug in, you know, you'll find some macro or code or little instruction that you put in, and it doesn't work, but it does something else. Like you've accidentally like, you know, done something else. It's not quite what you were expecting. Like that's happened to me a few times where I've like, okay, I want to make the text like, you know, I guess move, and then it'll take me to a new passage, and I put the text in and it doesn't do that, but it like activates this whole other idea of like, oh, okay, what do I do? Like, what can I communicate in my storytelling if you click on a piece of text and it moves, but nothing, like an abstraction almost. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. And that came out of me trying to do something, it not working, and then me being like, actually, I like this better. So yeah, that can be a really fun thing to come out of the, I guess, the play space with these kinds of tools.
It's really interesting that opportunity of like discovering a new feature or function by accident, and then being like, oh, how does that tie into the kind of story that I'm making, or the kind of thing I want to convey to the reader. And that's something I experienced as well. Could you are there any examples from sort of stuff you've made recently that would maybe speak to some of these approaches that you've been describing, like picking, like, you know, being careful about the number of features that you use, or using them in an intentional way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a piece that I'm working on at the moment, where I'm using, there's this, so it's in Twine, and there's this macro, which is like basically a little piece of code that you put in to Twine, and it makes the text do a certain thing, it's called the mouse over macro. And it's essentially like if you move your mouse over a word, it'll change to something else, or it can change to different words, or it can reveal new text. It can sometimes take you to another passage. And I was kind of playing around with that because Twine I'm quite comfortable in. So sometimes I will, to try and push myself, I'll like look at the list of macros and be like, all right, I'm going to try something with this macro because I haven't tried it before. So that's where this kind of came out. But so yeah, I was playing around with that, and I kind of was trying to make it similar sort of thing to the abstraction thing that I talked about before. I was trying to make it so that when I moused over the word, it would take me to a new passage. It would reveal some text and then take me to a new passage. But I accidentally made the text disappear. Like instead of going to a new passage, when you click on the text, it just disappears. And I was like, well, that's not what I wanted. But that's kind of cool. Like this idea of kind of like, because in this particular piece, I'm kind of exploring this kind of, I guess, disconnect or like kind of difference between kind of internal dialogue and external, like conversations, that kind of stuff. Because yeah, I have a lot of experience with that. That I was like, oh, this is a really great way for like me to kind of express or like show how like certain thoughts like appear in my head, and I kind of like try and get rid of them, I suppose, but like making the player or the reader kind of act out that process in a way, as opposed to just kind of reading it on the page.
And did
Yeah,
that
does
kind
that
of,
make sense?
yeah, did like how much of the story was there when you kind of, because you mentioned that you went out and you were like, I'm gonna find a new macro, a new
Yeah.
feature within Twine to play with to kind of grow my skills. Were you thinking about that story as you're like looking through the different features, or did you grab that feature and sort of start to kind of like, construct the sort of narrative intention for it around what it does? Like, what's the relationship between those two things, I guess, the tool and the story for you?
Yeah. It's kind of a bit of, but I kind of knew that I wanted to explore that kind of disconnecting, like communication and internal versus external kind of thoughts and communication, that kind of stuff. But I hadn't really figured out how I wanted to do it yet. And so that was kind of in the back of my mind, but I was like, oh, I'm just going to, then I went and looked through the macro list and picked the mouse over and was just kind of playing with it. And that's kind of, I don't know, I guess the spark where I came when I was playing with it. That was where I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. Like I knew what the like kind of some of the themes that I wanted to explore, but I wasn't quite sure how to execute them yet. I had some like ideas of old like macros that I've used before. Cycling links are a big one that I love, and kind of click replace, which is you click on words and they replace them with new words. But I've used them quite a bit, so I was like trying to push myself a little bit, and that was kind of the spark where I was like, haha, this is it. This is how I'm going to do it. Yeah. Which was really, really exciting to be like, when you're like, working in this kind of space and you get that aha moment from making something work, like programming in your programming, but also it being like linked to your, like knowing how you want to use it to communicate your story. It's really good. Feels really good.
Oh, it's so satisfying. Yeah,
So satisfying.
I can completely, really relate.
Yeah.
Just a quick reminder to people tuning in live that you can send in questions in the YouTube chat section or by tweeting #EM Toolkits, and we're going to go through them later in the session. Tegan, what makes a good tool for you? Like, are there particular types of tools that you kind of gravitate towards? Like, what do you consider when you're kind of working in tools that maybe you're familiar with, but also like looking at exploring new tools for making digital stuff?
Well,
it's a big question, so
no, it's fine. I have many thoughts. I really like, I think, like I said before, I gravitate towards tools that I can just kind of get in and have a play around with. And then from there, I will, if I'm feeling like, yeah, this is something I want to keep going with, then I might get into the whole, I guess, big user manual and tutorial, like YouTube tutorial space, and learn some or Googling in forums and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I do learn by doing largely. So that's, yeah, things like Bitsy and Twine have really, they have modular interfaces, which I really like, because you can kind of see everything that all the different pieces in one kind of window, and you can kind of work from it that way. I also, just being able to get in there and have a go, I really, really respond to. And it also, and I mean, this comes from me thinking about how, like, I guess my teaching and how to teach people these kinds of things too. I really like tools that you can, like, I love a web-based tool or a browser-based tool. I love like stuff that you can kind of get in and have a go without any kind of programming knowledge. That's not to say like the tools that I like you don't necessarily need to learn how to code. Like a lot of these tools tend to have their own, they may not have language, you may not have to know code like HTML or JavaScript or anything like that, but they do tend to have their own languages that if you keep using and go on, you will either want to learn or like end up learning by accident.
Or even like just tools that use like programming concepts, you know, like variables or like if else sort of statements and stuff, where it's like you might not be coding in a specific programming language, but something that is very akin to coding anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which I think is a cool thing. I think it makes it a little bit less scary for people to have these tools that kind of introduce you to coding in that way. But also just like, I like these tools. I was thinking a lot about it because when I was doing my programs in lockdown, you had to be like, all right, what's something that I can teach in 2 hours? You know, people don't have to download large files and install them. They have to be free. Like they have to be accessible on large, you know, like you don't have to have the fanciest computer to like use them. like before like last year I was, you know, using Twine on a very old laptop. Like this kind of stuff is this stuff that I had to think about for teaching. And then that kind of just made me think about like, I don't know, it's always in my head when I'm thinking about tools. I'm like, I want to be able to use, I'm interested in the kinds of tools that people can come to without too much, I guess, without requiring too much prior knowledge or fancy expensive tech. They can just kind of get in there and
accessibility and approachability.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes for more, I think it makes for really interesting, because like one of the many things I love about Bitsy and Twine and other tools of that kind of ilk, I suppose, is that because you get lots of people from different backgrounds coming to them, they have really interesting and quite lovely communities built like around them. Like the Bitsy community is so interesting and so lovely. And there's so many people in there from like, you know, graphic design backgrounds, but also like writing backgrounds, poetry backgrounds, like some programming and game design backgrounds as well. But it's a real melting like mix of people, which I think is really cool and makes for some really interesting work. So that's the stuff that kind of gets me excited, as opposed to, you know,
I love that.
That's the stuff. It gets me excited about this kind of stuff.
We had one of Bitsy's patron saint of Bitsy, Cecile Richard, on Toolkits Live last year, and their talk is in the Toolkits Live archive for anyone who's interested. I want to come back to the community aspect in a moment, but I just wanted to touch back to that idea of like tools running on, you know, hardware that is available to us. And this is almost entirely off topic, but I'm meaning to talk to you about it anyway.
Let's go.
You know, there's this arts duo called, I want to say 100 Rabbits or 1,000 Rabbits, and they make small games and they do like digital art commissions and stuff, a lot of like photography touch-up work, and they live on a yacht. They live on a boat and they just like sail around, and they were finding that like the tools that they had been trained to use, like Adobe and whatnot, to like do photo editing, was just like it was too, the internet connection was really patchy. It was sucking like huge amounts of energy in the process of like having this tool run on their computer. So they've like built several like software programs that are like meant to be these like minimal editors for photo editing and text editing and stuff that doesn't like sap the resources of their like solar powered boat. And that's such an incredible story of like
cool.
The kind of environment of tool needs, that they've experienced. And I think all of us kind of come to different tools with different needs, whether it's our like personal experiences, our kind of self-efficacy, or our comfort level, willing to like try and learn new things, what kind of hardware we have access to, what kind of community spaces we have access to. Do you want to speak a little bit to kind of the communities around some of the tools that you use? I know you mentioned Bitsy and the kind of community around Bitsy, and I know Twine also has a big community around it. How did you kind of come to find these communities, and how do they influence your practice?
So I guess, Bitsy I kind of came to after seeing Cecile's work, essentially. Which if you haven't played any of Cecile's work, it's just like so good. But I guess the Bitsy community is really lovely. They have I think my favorite part about it is they have these, or the creator of Bitsy, Adam Ledoux, puts together these wonderful Bitsy jams every month. And it's on this platform called itch.io, which is essentially I call it Bandcamp for games. It's if you need like a reference point for it. It's heaps and heaps of games on there. And lots of jams too. So you can kind of go and every month there'll be a different topic, and you can just go and make something. And the games that get made in those jams are really like, they span a whole lot of different I guess approaches and skill levels, and it's just really, really cool just to see people making stuff, making those games just for the sake of like making them and sharing them with other people, kind of thing. It reminds me a lot of like I mentioned zines before. It reminds me a lot of the zine community, where it's a lot of like, you come together, or you make a thing. It's kind of low. You can sit down and make something and photocopy it and share it with people, and it doesn't cost that much, and you can just kind of it's the whole create, like you can go to fairs. Well, you used to be able to go to fairs and trade them with people, and or like just mail them stuff. That kind of it exists out of
that communal kind of ethos.
That's kind of what that feels like the jams kind of feel like. And there's a Bitsy Discord as well, which is really lovely. I go on there mostly just to find solutions to problems that I'm having, but there's really lovely, it feels really lovely on that Discord. And the creator of Bitsy, and there's a lot of people that make hacks as well that allow you to kind of do things outside of I guess the parameters for the tool. And they're all in there making stuff, and it's just it feels like a really kind of communal space, which I like a lot.
Do you just to like recap a couple things in case people kind of don't maybe have the context? So you mentioned jams, and like, so jams are available, open to anyone to participate in, right?
Yes.
The other thing I was thinking about was, you mentioned Discord. And for those who aren't aware, Discord is a a chat app that you can download on your phone or on your desktop, and it allows for kind of semi-public spaces where people can kind of congregate and talk about specific things. There are Discords that are public, or kind of like, anybody can join them, like the Bitsy Discord and the Twine Discord, and they're so good for troubleshooting and seeing what other people are working on and making, and even just like getting to chat to people who are like enthusiastic about the things that you're making and that and the medium that you're making. That's what's so good about zine fairs, right? You get to like you talk, everybody there like loves zines, and you can have like the sort of dorkiest conversations about like the specifics of like staple shapes and like paper
log arm
weights,
staplers.
and it's a similar sort of thing on Discord. And then you can also have like I don't know about, don't want to speak to your experience, but for me, I've also have like a few Discord setups with just like my friends, and that's a really nice opportunity to kind of like swap sort of tips on tools, or kind of also sharing call outs for stuff like, hey, this website's coming up and is open for submission soon, and they accept Twine games or they accept Bitsy games. And do you have any kind of experiences like that?
So I kind of, after I ran some workshops with the library, I kind of wanted to keep going with like being able to like share this stuff with people, and kind of exactly what you said, just kind of nerd out in this on this kind of stuff, similar to what you would do at a zine fair. But Discord is a really great place for that. But I also kind of wanted it to I feel weird about, like, I like facilitating, but I also feel weird about like being the facilitator sometimes, because I'm like, I am not the authority on these topics. I just want to kind of like share this stuff and we can work on it together, kind of thing. So I actually I put together a Discord for people to kind of come and join and basically do exactly what you said, learn new tools, be aware of like opportunities, and kind of have, if they have questions, troubleshooting stuff, just kind of create a space where people feel like they can, because sometimes you can feel a little bit intimidated on the larger Discords. There's lots of like, you can feel a little bit shy about asking questions, particularly if you're not a big programmer, or at least I can too sometimes. You're just like, I don't know any of this stuff, and you've given me an answer and I still don't know what you're talking about. I'm so sorry. I made a Discord called Casual Creators for people to come and just kind of do basically like I like that you've likened it to zine fairs, because that's exactly what it feels like. Just everyone's just like really jazzed and excited and wants to share this stuff with people. It's just so
it's also like what you were saying about that being in those workshops, and you're kind of, you don't want to position yourself as an authority on this tool. I feel like both with zine fairs and also Discords, or nice Discord communities, everybody is kind of coming to it with this like shared like we're all on an equal playing field, I guess. And I really like that kind of that vibe. And it's the same thing when you're at zine fairs. You don't, very rarely do you encounter people who are like, I don't know, trying to be snooty or gatekeep.
That's very true. Even just the act of like, being able to trade with people, like if they're at like that kind of it feels very much on a like you said, level playing field.
I think that ties into the kind of we've spoken before a bit about the philosophy, I guess, behind some of these tools that you're using that are kind of like free and open source, that idea of accessibility and approachability, and also like, that things aren't kind of locked behind sort of
like paywalls paywalls
and sort of like proprietary software formats that
Yep.
you have to pay this license to be able to like even see something made with this tool or something like that.
Yeah.
That God, where on earth was I going with this?
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, that kind of like, yeah, the philosophy of like, and it's interesting too because I've thought a lot about this from like a creator perspective. But on the flip side too, I guess, wanting to make work that people can access, like the output, like the work that you make being, accessible to people who perhaps, don't have, the latest graphics card or like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
particularly these days. But just like high-end software, that kind of stuff, being able to, run a small HTML file, or that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
It's good to think about the output as well, which I hadn't been doing as much recently. I watched a great interview, I think it was Everest Pipkin, who was talking about their work and how they want to put out work that people can, play without or read without necessarily having to have, even like a strong internet connection or like, low file sizes, kind of that kind of stuff that, which you can make just interesting work, I think, in that space. Yeah, it doesn't have to be all like,
I mean, you think about
super
you think about the history of Twine games over the past like 10 years and some of the sort of stuff that's come out of Twine, like Depression Quest, this like multi-award winning game, and Cecile being nominated for an AGDA this week or last
so
few weeks ago
for the Bitsy game.
That's just so incredible. And publications like Cordite, VoiceWorks Magazine, Liminal, Running Dog, all publishing work, with these tools that are like very, beautiful, moving kind of experiences. You mentioned Everest Pipkin, and that just like I remember the point that I was trying to make before. But just to quickly mention, shout out VoiceWorks Online. They're running a digital writing jam in October next month as part of National Young Writers Festival. So if you haven't experienced a jam and you or are interested in trying one of these tools that we're talking about, sign up to the jam. I'm sure the link can be dropped in the comments. And I just participated in the digital writing jam earlier this year, and VoiceWorks sets up a Discord, and they share prompts and tips for different tools, and it's just fantastic. Highly recommend. You mentioned Everest Pipkin and the connection between one of the aspects of zine fairs and zines that I feel like links to these tools is like there is so much joy in making things not necessarily for to put on, to sell on Steam or to submit to some big journal, but like making things for yourself or making things for people that you care about. And Everest has a fantastic kind of interactive essay on Running Dog called Gift Game, which is like all about that idea. And I've definitely made little things and tools that are like not necessarily to be published, but as a kind of present for somebody. And you can see sometimes on like people's itches when you can see what they've uploaded, and you find something and it's like, this is this was for so and so's like birthday or anniversary, and I love that.
Me too. Using the tools to just make things for your friends is really lovely. Really, really lovely. That thing of just like or even just for the joy of, I feel like the process of the joy of making something with this stuff can be a reward in itself. Sometimes I'll make something and I'll get to the end and I'll be like, don't know if I'm going to put this anywhere. That was just really fun. Maybe I feel like there's enough sometimes it's not always like that, but yeah, sometimes the joy of making this stuff for yourself or for a few people is more than enough, which is really nice.
Yeah, so good. I'm conscious that we're getting into the back half of our session.
Oh yeah.
We haven't really talked about coding in detail. Can you tell us about your experience with code, and like, do you write computer code in your work? How did you kind of learn to do that, if you do? Like, code.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Code. What is it? How do we code? Yeah. So yes, no, I had no experience really with coding. I mean, I did website design in year 9, but that was as far as I got.
Huge.
And yeah, we used, I think it was Microsoft Front Page. It was a whole thing. But I didn't really have much experience at all. Had kind of looked at a little bit of HTML, but didn't really know what it did. I don't really code in my work at all, except when I'm running programs. I kind of came to it, I suppose, seeing stuff, reading digital work that I liked and being like, I want to learn how to do that. And then kind of Twine felt like the most approachable way to do that, because it was largely text-based, and I was at the time working mostly with Word, so I'm like, all right, I feel like I can make this work. And I used to say like, oh, Twine is great, because you don't have to know any code to use it, which is, I think I touched on this before, but it's not true in that you do kind of learn the language of Twine, but that can be, or at least for me, it was really good because it was basically like coding training wheels, I guess, in that learning this kind of simplified language, seeing how it worked, and the kind of learning the process of programming, of like, trying to do something, not looking at the user manual, being like, I don't really know how to do this. Google, or like search in the Twine forums, find someone's, solution, or like someone has already asked this question, because usually someone has already asked the question. Copying and pasting code, like tweaking it, like that whole process I learned by doing Twine, which is essentially like a large part of like coding and programming, kind of more widely.
That's like, you've touched on something that I think, having run a lot of workshops in digital tools, I think is maybe the most thing that's like most unintuitive to writers, who I think are very like conscious of like plagiarism and reuse of stuff. Is that like so much of coding involves looking at code that other people have written and like copy pasting bits of it, taking like some code from source A and source B and mashing it together wrapping it up with cellophane and hoping it doesn't fall apart.
Exactly. Gaffer taping it and being like, okay, it works. It's ugly, but it works.
There's a website called Stack Overflow that is for kind of programmers asking for help about coding problems, and people post questions about Twine on there as well, and I go there every time I create something with Tracery, this like generative text tool that I use in kind of tandem with HTML and JavaScript, and Stack Overflow did a survey earlier this year, or did some research, and they found that 1 in 4 people who visit a Stack Overflow page copy something within the first 5 minutes of being on the page. And I'm like, that's such a good stat. It says so much about like both the website, but also the kind of like culture of programming, right?
Yeah,
where
totally.
you're not expected to know everything out of the top of your head, or remember all these like, how certain things are phrased, or you're constantly like looking that stuff up and like having it as a reference as you're building stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. The like, the thing of people like typing out lines and lines and lines of code that you like see me, like, at least, yeah, for me that does not happen. And largely for, yeah, when I talk to other people, programmers, I'll be like, oh, I don't really know how to code, I just copy and paste stuff. They're like, that's what we do as well. Like, it's yeah, it's, and yeah, you're so true that you, like, you meant being a writer and being like, am I allowed to do this? Can I, like, I'm pretty sure I've Googled, like, do I have to credit people's code before? Because I was like, I feel weird just being like, you know, copying, but
Yeah.
yeah, you
I
can,
mean, it's
mush
always
stuff
good to
together.
check. Yeah, and it's good to check,
Yeah.
licenses and stuff.
Yes, that's very
CodePen, for
true.
example, is a website that offers lots of where people post their kind of code experiments, and they're
Yep.
free for non-commercial reuse with
Yep.
citation. And I've
Yeah.
published pieces before where I'm kind of using a couple different code tutorials for very specific things. There's an example I'm thinking about with like a sort of rotating cube that I made, and
Ooh.
that was just following someone else's tutorial. And I like put in the code comments of the file, all the sort of sources, I guess, both,
That's really good.
stuff that I was maybe alluding to in the text, or kind of text I was repurposing in like a collage sense, but also like code that I was collaging. And
Yeah.
so I think that sort of citational practice is like really lovely, and
Yeah.
not, it's a different way of thinking about work, I guess. Different
Yeah.
mindset to maybe writing.
Yes. Yeah, it's a different approach. And I guess that stuff is good too, because like sometimes you look at something and you're like, I have no idea how they did that. Like, I guess the other way, like, yeah, being able
Or
to be, yeah,
like you look at your own stuff and you're
yes,
like 3 weeks from now, and you're like, I don't know how I did
how did I
that.
do that? Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Yeah, having
Pasting
that.
your links and your
Yeah,
trail of building stuff, so
yeah,
useful.
yeah, yeah, so useful. Yeah, as a way to credit people's work, but also to be like, yeah, because you're not going to remember that in like, a month from now, like how you put that together. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, before we jump to the sort of questions from the audience, do you have any other advice for digital storytellers who want to pick up tools like the ones we discussed tonight?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've touched on the coding stuff a bit. Yeah, like, don't feel that you have to know a programming language to start doing this stuff. You can just get in there and do it. Um, just, yeah, reading a lot of digital literature can be a really good way just to have a look at people's stuff and try and figure out like how they did it, or like see if that's a way that can spark some ideas for yourself. I mean, I tried to use Twine a few times before it actually clicked for me, and the way that it clicked was that I saw I played a piece of a Twine game called Enthymema by Alana Cole, and she used cycling links, which feature a lot in my work. And it wasn't until I like kind of saw how she used that I was like, oh, I know what I want to, how I want to do this, kind of thing. So I think, yeah, and I think we're really lucky at the moment. There's a lot of stuff, like VoiceWorks is publishing lots of great digital literature. The Cordite, just, yeah, the game issue has got so much great stuff in there. Running Dog's a really good place for that kind of stuff. So just kind of looking at what other people are doing and seeing like, how that fits into your own kind of practice, and if you want to give that stuff a go, that's a really good way to kind of get started. And yeah, like you said, don't feel like you have to know everything about a tool to start getting in there and using it. I still don't know everything about Twine, and they keep adding to it, so I probably never will.
Yeah,
Which is great.
we were just talking before this session about how they released an update to Twine like 6 months ago, and I only just looked at it over the weekend, and there are so many quality of life improvements for people who are
Yeah.
learning for the first time that I don't think there's ever been a better time to pick up Twine, for example.
Yeah. Oh yeah, even in just the few years that I like was using it, it's just gotten it's gotten even more like approachable, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. I also just really quickly wanted to kind of ask about or kind of touch on the idea of tools that like chaining together tools and using tools for things that like for analog practice rather than digital practice. I knew, I use Tracery to make infinitely generating poems, but then I also use those poem generators to write. I like take lines that I like from them and I start making kind of print poems from them. Do you have tools or practices there where like you're using two tools together, or you're using a tool to make something analog, or do you have analog practices that feed into your digital tools? Sorry, this is like 5 questions in one.
No,
But
that's okay. I mean, I still plot out my twines on pen and paper sometimes. Like I'll draw the little boxes in like a notebook, which is so yeah, I still use that. I've used Tracery in a similar way to like create like a generative kind of prompts, I suppose, using like feeding in text, and then from there, from the prompts, like expanding on a piece of writing, which was fully just like a page kind of page fiction. And that's really cool. That can be a really cool way, particularly because generative text can sometimes by chance put words together or things together that you would not think to do, just in the way that it's, it works. Like generative text is really cool like that. So that can be really cool to be like, oh, I would never think to put these two words together, and that has just like sparked this whole idea. So that's a really cool way. I mean, I haven't done this, but I know of people sometimes use Twine to help storyboard. I guess they're like if they're doing narrative, like game design, that kind of stuff. Twine can be a really good tool where you can like test out branching narratives and things like that without having to have all the other stuff in there. You can just kind of look at the text and kind of see where you want to take the story. Yeah, I haven't really I haven't used tools together. I've kind of used them separately, but I'm keen to give it a shot. I'd like to kind of mush some things together.
I think some people will like. I know some people who or have kind of had experiences where people will glom to a tool that's like maybe overly complicated, and like they're looking for like the one tool to rule it all kind of thing. And you can like take a very simple tool that's like just gonna work with, I don't know, it's just gonna do apply image filters, or like let you do sort of basic photo manipulation or add stickers on images, and then you can take that image, take it out of that tool and put it into your interactive text adventure. And now it's like a multimedia interactive text adventure, or like looking for those things and looking for tools that do maybe like one or two things really well, and being like, how do I plug this in with other things that I'm making so that I'm doing something that maybe this tool alone can't capture. But if I went to try and do it in like something like Unity or whatever, like a big game environment, it's going to be too complicated, or the learning curve is going to be too steep to do the same sort of thing,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, image manipulation's a good one. That's a good one because you can put images into Twine, but Twine has no real functionality for changing like you're essentially just putting the image into it with HTML. But there's a great tool. Actually, there was a tool that I was using called Strike, which kind of you can put images in there, and kind of it's just very basic kind of image manipulation, and you can kind of turn them black and white and make them really kind of pixelated and kind of, I guess, draw on top of the images, and it kind of makes this really kind of interesting, weird, kind of image. It almost looks like a great. It's like it's got this real kind of spooky quality of like a grainy black and white kind of.
Like a sort of
kind
vivid grayscale sort of pixely.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of thing.
And and then you download it as a very small file size, and it has its own kind of strange energy, which I really like.
I love tools with
So
energy that you
yeah,
can
it's just
tactile, multi-sensory. You can talk about it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then putting that into a Twine game is like, I guess, the kind of imagery around that. Yeah.
We're coming up on the hour. Let's
Mm.
jump to a quick question. Maybe this is a pretty deep question. This is from Robbie. What makes you decide to pursue an idea, and how well it will your idea how what makes you decide to pursue an idea, and does how well that idea will work with a tool influence that, or is it more about whether you're interested in the story?
That is a good question. I mean, I've certainly like had ideas for story or like things that I want to do, and like a certain, I guess, way that I want to execute it in using a tool, and then that just doesn't work, or it's beyond my kind of, I guess, scope at that point in time of like learning. So I kind of just, I will like change it, or maybe pull it back a little bit, because I just can't figure out how to make what I want to do work. And you know, there's a certain level of frustration you get to where you're like, screw it, I'm gonna change it. Sometimes I think that can be, it's like that thing of limitation. Sometimes, you know, pulling it back will actually make the idea, or make it stronger, or more interesting. Sometimes I just have to pivot and try something else because it just won't work. But yeah, I think that kind of interplay of the limitations of like my knowledge with the programming, and then what the idea that I want to execute can make for some really interesting stuff. Sometimes it's just annoying, but yeah.
I feel like there's like, I've had some really nice experiences where that friction like is generative and it offshoots to something else. So I'm like, this is the idea, and then I'm going to bring this feature in, and then the feature doesn't do what I want it to do, or doesn't have the intended effect. But like, then it's like, oh, we could, but if I like the not the actual effect rather than the intended effect, like I could take that and use it in a completely other piece. So you know, I end up discovering something new, or the real piece sometimes, in that sort of experimentation space.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've definitely had things where I'm like, oh, I love this, I'm gonna put this I'm gonna save that. Or like you said, be like, nah, the piece is going to be about this now because I really like this. I want to do this now. I don't care about the other stuff. Yeah.
I've got give you 1 minute for this last question, just really quickly. Okay. Do
Quick
games
fire.
and other platforms or consoles influence how you design the layout and storyline of your Bitsy and Twine games?
Ooh, I mean, I play a lot of games, so probably unconsciously. That's a good question. I think probably unconsciously in some way. I'm not sure. That's
influence
a good
comes
one.
from everywhere.
Yeah, influence comes from everywhere. I do play a lot of narrative games, so I mean, I guess probably the one that's perhaps influenced, or like the one that feels the most accessible to me in my writing, which is quite a big one, or a common one, Kentucky Route Zero. That's a really kind of interesting multimedia, lots of tech stuff, lots of, you know, it's very much a, I guess, game, but it's probably like the closest to like interactive story, at least in a way that I would probably like text. What am I trying to say? Like the way that they use language is really interesting.
Something to for our participants, visitors to look up after this talk. I've got to wrap up, but thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, and sending through your questions. And thank you, Tegan, for spending the time with us tonight. You can
Of
check out
course.
Tegan's work by visiting teganewebb.neocities.org. This session will be available on YouTube as a resource and will be captioned in the coming days if you'd like to revisit any of tonight's conversation. And on Tuesday, the 28th of September at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, our performance poetry facilitator, Manisha Anjali, will be joined by Tabani Chuma for the next Toolkits Live, The Alchemy of Performance. You can tune into that on the Express Media YouTube page. Thank you again, Tegan, so much.
Thank you. This is so nice. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
And have a good evening, everybody.